Good morning. Nice of you guys to drop by.
What a piece of junk. What are you talking about?
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed.
Look, don't worry. Everything's gonna be fine. Trust me.
I don't know what all this trouble is about, but I'm sure it must be your fault. Don't get technical with me.
This bickering is pointless.
Don't everybody thank me at once.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
I'm glad you're here to tell us these things.
How
could you even say that?
I got a bad feeling about this.
Well, come on.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Would you get going, you pirate?
Get in there, you big furry-o! I don't care what you smell.
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
If what you've told me is true, you will have gained my trust.
I like the sound of that.
Get a shuttle ready. I don't know. Fly casual.
Shuttle Tydirium, what is your cargo and destination?
Transmission commencing.
Okay, Galactic HoloNet. Thanks for making tonight's episode. This is episode 4 of the Shuttle Tydirium, the mothership of casual X-Wing play. I'm your host, Captain James Chadwick, also known as Hey Chadwick on the forums, and I have my co-pilot, Philip Mead.
Welcome aboard, everyone. I'd just like to quickly remind everyone that the use of glitter stems in the lavatories is strictly forbidden by Imperial law, and tampering with the spice detector units in the lavatory is a Imperial offense.
And making sure we're repairing each of those spice detectors every time is Jake Freed. He's our chief engineer.
Hi, thank you so much. And right now I'm in the engine room trying to get all those Wookiee hairballs out of the hyperdrive unit. I don't even know how they're in there to begin with, but I'm working
on it. Let a Wookiee
it.
into the hyperdrive.
I don't know. I don't know.
What about all these long hairs? All right, and dealing with our diplomatic crisis, we have our cranky protocol droid, Jonathan Pierce, also known as J-Bot.
Oh, I'm definitely the person you want to go to for diplomacy. I mean, it perfectly fits me.
Exactly. So we're really excited about tonight's episode, at least I am. Tonight, our main focus is really going to be on Dagobah Dave's trench run. But before we get into too much, I would like to say that we do have a Facebook page. See, at this point, at least for us, episode 2 hit the store. Hit the internet just a couple days ago, so we've gotten a bunch of feedback and stuff, and we're really excited to actually hear from you guys. Because being new to this, we're setting things out. We'd love to hear positive or negative feedback from anybody, and to help facilitate that, we have a Facebook page. Facebook is a little weird in its naming convention. If you're trying to put in, say, Shuttle and then Tydirium, it doesn't like that saying. You need to have a proper name. So we are The Shuttle, as in one word, The Shuttle. Last name, Tydirium, on Facebook. So hopefully you guys can find us, and please be our friend, and we'll go ahead and try to create a group as well to get things going. All right. So is everybody good tonight?
Yeah, I think so. Raring to go.
Excellent. I want to start things off with the captain's question. So my question of the week, and I'm going to go straight to J-Bot. Since I kind of know... I kind of know one answer. It's a 3-part question. What are your 3 favorite ships in X-Wing?
Oh, it's got to be pertain to the game, right? Okay.
Yep.
Well, obviously, the first one I think you know is a gimme is the Hawk. And I think I've talked about that at length.
Hawk the Slayer.
Yeah, the Hawk, obviously. I won't go into all the details since I bored everybody with that in the last episode. Wow, the other 2 favorite ships, and it's not just obviously I'm not going to base this just on their playability since I'm not really the best.
Whatever you like,
sort of thing.
Whatever.
Off the top of my head, I really like. It's a new ship. I'm not going to know the right name of it, but I always call it like the E-Wing on steroids, but it's a scum ship. It came out in the wave previous to the one that just came out. I know I'm not really narrowing that down for anybody. Yeah, whatever. Like I said, I can't.
Not the Carax fighter, is it?
Yeah, it's a Carax. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like I said, to me it looks. To me it looks like an E-Wing on steroids. Is kind of the way I've always thought about it. It's hard for me to hate the E-Wing either. To me, those 3 ships, they just seem like kind of a mix between spaceships and fighter ships. Obviously, the the Hawk is more of a just kind of my classic. I'm a kid and I drew a spaceship. Look at me, sort of ship. And then the other two just feel like really kind of hunkered down, sporty. Lots of guns and fast flying sorts of ships. And I guess that's what I lean towards more than I do the big kind of heavy ships and stuff that the rest of the game has.
Cool. Excellent. All right, so co-pilot, Philip.
I would say that number one would be your classic X-Wing, T-65. Just because, it's a general
X-Wing.
awesome. It's it's an X-Wing. Come on, doesn't have to be a complicated answer.
Right.
And then going from there, I think actually the E-Wing, which is sort of weird. Not a whole lot of people out there love the E-Wing for being an E-Wing, and if anybody is listening to this, I'll probably catch some flack for expressing any endearment for the E-Wing. So many people
not going to get any from me.
Yeah, well, so many people out there don't like it for that the laser cannon above the canopy, because that's unrealistic, and we can't have an unrealistic spaceship in Star Wars, guys. Come on.
Totally unlike a couple of actual fighter jets that exist in the real world that have the same thing.
Right.
Well, anyway, I sort of like it for just being like a second fiddle type ship. I feel like it's it's the unloved version of the X-Wing in the books. Anyway, and then I think for number 3, and I'm not real clear on number 3. I think probably the B-Wing. It's just a cool ship.
You see, I got a grudge against the B-Wing because when the B-Wings came out, they knocked out the X-Wings.
Yeah.
And I just like X-Wings. I like them, and then it's like, oh, no one wants to play an X-Wing because it's a B-Wing. Oh, B-Wing is so great, so cool. I think it's all so good. So,
we're veering into Phantom territory.
Oh boy!
No, nowhere near. Nothing else is a special hatred in my heart like the Phantom. But little bit of the dark side inside me is the Phantom. But okay, so we can move to the chief engineer, and I have to say, please don't get too technical. Talk about space hemis and just you could say it's got engine stuff, and
yes, very well. I'll keep it kosher. Okay, so my 3 favorite ships. My number 1 favorite ship, I think, is the Lambda class shuttle. Ironically, the shuttle that we're on right now. When that came out, I just loved playing with it. I loved that it was bigger. I loved that it was slower. I loved that it was the only ship at the time. In fact, you could let me know if it's still the only ship that has a 0-stop maneuver.
Yeah, it's not the only, but
the YV666 has one now.
Okay, so it has one too. But at the time, at least when I first started playing, that was the only ship that did it. It was just so cool. It's like, what? I'm just going to stop moving. Are you going to bump into me? Yeah, you are. And it was just so cool. I loved that. Also, being the chief engineer, I love a big ship where I can not be in the cockpit all the time and go down to the underbelly and work on the engine. Haha. So I do like the Lambda class shuttle a lot. Also, it's very iconic for me. I loved it in the movies as well. But I do love to fly it. I love that it could accept crew. And along the same vein, the Decimator is one of my faves. For me, when early on in X-Wing, I would play Imperials. My wife would play Rebellion, and I was always jealous of the Millennium Falcon. I was always jealous that she could fly in a circle and she could shoot me from any angle. That was cool. I really wanted that. I wanted that so bad. I love turrets. And I didn't have one. And so when the Decimator came out, it was like a birthday celebration. I was so excited, and I immediately got one because it was the coolest ship I had seen, especially for Imperials. Third favorite ship, and this is probably actually tying with my first, believe it or not, but is the TIE Interceptor. But of the TIE Interceptors, it's the Royal Guard TIE Interceptor. I'm absolutely in love with first of all, I love TIE Interceptors. They're a really nicely manufactured TIE, and it's very fast, obviously. But the fact that there's the elite TIE Interceptors, not even the Suntir fell. What do they? I can't remember the name of his squadron. What do they call his squadron again?
Is it Raid?
181st.
Okay. 181st. That's right. It's not any of their elite. It's the Royal Guard elite. These are the guys that escort Emperor Palpatine when he's on his shuttle. They are bright freaking red. I mean, they are not hiding out in the void of space. They are right in front of you. They're like, hey, you're coming after me, buddy. I'm looking right at you. I'm going to shoot you. You're going to go after that Shuttle Tydirium? Nope, you're not. You're going to see me right in front of your sights, and I'm shooting lasers at your face. I love that. I love that kind of like that ballsy, that cockiness with the red paint scheme. It's just very cool to me. So those are my 3.
Excellent. Well, I will say, as a captain, I always did not want to get stationed on a decimator because those are long-range patrol crafts, and I don't like to be out that long in deep space, So, some people actually like those. Most of us captains don't. So, just to let you know. All right. So for mine, I have to say, playing in Wave 1, I started with Imperials, and I love the humble TIE Fighter. Because so many people, I think, who start later in the game, particularly after TIE Interceptors have come out, really just dismiss the TIE Fighter. Like, oh, you start talking about Arc Dodgers, and people are like, well, TIE Fighters aren't really Arc Dodgers. I'm like, look, people were talking about Arc Dodgers before the TIE Interceptor came out, and they were talking about the TIE Fighter. It's the original Arc Dodger, okay? Yeah, sure, you get better with boost and barrel roll, but if you can get good at a TIE Fighter, the generics, the named ones, there's like so many different levels of TIE Fighter. You can do so much if you know what you're doing with the TIE Fighter. And I don't mean flying in formation, because that to me is boring. TIE Fighters, a TIE swarm, actually, swarms the enemy. And TIE Fighters, I think, like, I've won tournaments with TIE Fighters. And just, like, when you can out-snooker and you do that barrel roll in someone's way, and they're like, oh, crud. You can see their face falling because you set it up where that one academy got out there, and that one sucker is surrounded by a bunch of TIE Fighters and going to get blasted. Like, to me, TIE Fighters are the best. I like them.
Nice.
Excellent. All right, and then 2, I'll say the TIE Bomber, because I love ordnance. I loved them before they were fixed. I think they're very versatile. I think like the one bank barrel roll, you can just kind of roll backwards from where you're starting position. There's a lot of stuff you can do with a TIE Bomber, and it's surprising, and it's not such a bulky ship as people think. So I'll just go with that.
Nice.
And 3, I'm a bit tied, to be honest. 3 is very hard for me because on one hand, I like T-65 X-Wings. When I like to play Rebels on occasion, and I like to just throw out some X-Wings, just pew pew pew, and just they're great ships. They're fast. They hit hard. I don't care about barrel rolling or boosting or whatever. I want to fly some good ships and launch some torpedoes at epic ships, and I like X-Wings. They're pretty cool. But I also really like the Star Viper. I did Shizor with Prince Shizor with Z95s, 5 Z95s, and I almost made it. In my last game, my dice crapped. It was an opponent that I wanted to face, a Decimator. It can't dodge. I was going to win this, and my dice were so bad, I flubbed it, and I missed the top 16 by that much. But people named that list Prince in the New Power Generation.
Very good.
And like a lot of people bag the Star Viper, but I think you could do a lot with it if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you could definitely have a good list with Shizor, because he can be so tanky with as long as he has those buddies around, and then if he survives to the late game, Shizor is really quite good.
Yeah, I came in second place at a tournament with it once, and very good. And I had to say, honorable mention, I like the Seek. I don't know why I like it. Everyone hates it. I like the way it looks. I like to make an Ion Seek. I like even just Seeks with nothing on it. I like to play Seeks. I try very hard to make them effective or throw them in lists, for the fun of it. But that's an honorable mention.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I always get those the Shizor ship. That one always gets torn up every time I try and fly it.
Yeah,
it's not exactly a simple ship. Yeah, it only works well in certain lists, I think.
I remember blocking a fat Chewbacca, I think it was. He tried to do his too hard turn and then boost to get out of the way, and you go ha ha and shoot at me, and I threw one of my Z95s way out there, You know, if he doesn't anything else, he was just doing nothing. But the look in his face. I killed Chewbacca in 2 rounds. It was great. All right. Okay. But let's see. Next, I think...
well, we wanted to go... I know we wanted to review the Dagobah Dave scenario and the trench run. But first, Jake, I think I see... something wrong with J-Bot's restraining bolt. Do you mind taking a look at that? See if it needs any maintenance?
Oh yeah, let me see that. Oh boy, yeah, that needs to be replaced.
Yeah, I think something's wrong there.
I'm gonna have to take that off for a couple minutes.
Yeah, he was complaining about it earlier.
Shoot, I gotta take that off for a couple of minutes. I'll be back with a new one. Hang on a second. Let me just...
Totally chafing. It was totally chafing.
Where's the locks to the door?
Luke, you will go to the Dagobah system.
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
Luke, go to the Dagobah system.
It just isn't fair. No, I don't even know what I'm doing here. We're wasting our time.
Your insight serves you well.
Is he gone now?
All right, we can do.
Well, I'm going to start with a story. Okay, so a few weeks ago, I walk into the store. I'm all happy, work's over, getting ready to go have all my ships blown out from under me because that's typically what goes on when I go to the game store. But they've got new ships out, a new wave. I don't know what any of these things are, but I'm going to go look at them, and they're going to be cool, and they're going to be new and shiny. And walk into the store and put my stuff down and walk over to the counter, and I see the new ship sitting there. I'm like, oh wow, these are awesome. Something's wrong, and I can't really put my finger on it. So, and instead of buying them, I went back and sat down and ate my burrito and kind of just mulled things over a little bit and decided, I'll go ahead and make my list for the night and see what it is I'd like to have blown up. And I start pulling my cards out and I start pulling my ships out, and then it hits me. It's staring me right in the face. I walk back over to the counter, and I know I'm right. These new ships that Fantasy Flight's putting out, they got much better paint jobs than the ships that I got like a year and a half ago. I mean, I'm not talking about just a little bit of color here and there. I'm talking about real detail. I mean, whoever they've got working on those things now, is actually doing a really good job. I don't know if it's a computer. I don't know if it's a...
I think they use Wookiee slaves, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if it's somebody in a sweatshop somewhere on a moon hidden deep out on the outer rim. I don't know, but they've got a lot better. And it really started making me mad. I mean, I spent good money on these ships. I should have an opportunity or something that I could trade these things in and get a new ship, but then I'm like, okay, I get it. Fantasy Flights, they're trying to bring new people in. They're trying to get new people into the game with these new ships. I'll accept it. But, then I sit down on the table and I see these new sparkly bright ships compared to my old ones. I'm like, man, they look like, scrapyard rejects compared to these new ships. and that wasn't where I really got mad. Honestly, I can live with that. I get it. I got old stuff. That's how things go. The new cars, the new models always look better than the old ones. But what really started to get at me, what really started to eat away at me, is that you've got people out there, and you know who you are. You've got people out there who are not satisfied with these brand new paint jobs that I think are great. No. They have to take these ships home and repaint them. and I'm not talking about some little back alley spray tan. No, I'm talking about somebody who's like a Crystal Brush nominee who's picking out every little detail on that thing, putting call signs and kill marks and flames. And heck, I even saw a guy in the store the other week that had lights and LED in his ship, and that's not right. Because any one of you people who's a long-term gamer knows, and you know this is a fact, that hand-painted figures always get better dice results than ones that come right out of the box. We all know this. And you know what that means? You know what that tells me? These people are cheating. They're doing it on purpose. They're painting their ships because they know. Right, they are painting for an advantage, and that's a shame. And you know what? I'm sitting there, I'm stewing, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If my paint jobs on my ships somehow offend your delicate sensibilities, well then maybe, just maybe, you need to walk your special self back across those railroad tracks to your fancy store with the bright lights and the classical music and little old lady pushing a cart up and down the aisle handing out tea and crumpets. Because maybe I like the way my ships look. Maybe I like the fact that my ships look like they've been hand-dipped into the porta potty at the local construction site and then wiped off with a dirty rag and then put on the table. That's character. Like my ships, they got character. That missing wing, that's battle damage. That's experience. My ships, they've been through stuff. They've seen things that your fancy ships with their fancy paint jobs couldn't possibly understand. Heck, some of those guys look like they've never even left a showroom with that ship. You know, that's ridiculous. I'd be afraid, personally. I would be afraid to fly a ship that's well painted. I'd have to park it way out at the edge of the map just to keep lowlifes from dinging the paint with their door. You know, and that's a shame. That is a shame. And I think those people should be ashamed of themselves for putting that on the table and making the rest of us normal people who are willing to accept the stuff that Fantasy Flight gives us. They're putting us to shame, making us feel somehow not worthy of playing against them on the table. So that's what I'm mad about this week. It's not really an angry rant. It's more of just a
no.
It's
not angry.
Just
that wasn't angry.
This is just I need people to understand that this is a scourge on our fan base, and if we can eradicate it, that would be good. But at the same time, I saw this really cool paint job for a YT 2400 online. And if anybody out there just wants to change my opinion on these things, they could, doll one up for me. But I'd be willing. I would be willing to reconsider my opinion on this topic.
Someone might need to send him some paint for his dice to get better. I have to be happy.
Yeah,
and I
want
want
the way my dice go, they need to go ahead and carve a couple more symbols into them before they paint them, because I'm going to need all the help I can get.
We need a custom painted hawk set.
Actually, I've seen some really cool ones out there, and it really does bug me. I mean, come on, that's too much. These figures are already painted. That's why I'm playing this game, right? That's why we're all playing this game, because we've already spent a fortune on 40K figures and fantasy figures and War Machine and whatever War XYZ game you want to call, spent countless hours of our lives hunched over a table painting. Why would you do this with ships that have already got a paint job on them? And most of them are really nicely painted. I mean, come on.
I have one of my degrees is actually Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting, and I painted up orcs and goblins for fantasy, and I'm told I have the biggest, most painted orc and goblin army in the state of North Carolina. But when it comes to X-Wing, I don't want to paint anything. They're pre-painted. I've got all the Wave 1 T65s with their crappy paint jobs. And
that new one, I guess, that's coming out, it's very fancily painted. It really is going to make my old X-Wings look just horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, that was perfect. I do have a spare restraining bolt here, and if we're ready for this, let me just kind of get that. All right, there you go.
He says the restraining bolt has short-circuited his recording system.
Excellent.
What were we talking about again?
We're talking about battle damage. There's a guy, Blake, at our store who's got a Z95 that he loves to use, and it lost its cannon. I got knocked, and something happened, and he named the guy Lefty.
I think he lost one on another ship that he calls Righty now, so he's got a full set.
Oh, it's hysterical. He's got Lefty and Righty.
He lost the whole bottom set of wings on one of the newer X-Wings, like that came in the new starter set. Like, he lost the whole bottom pair, so it looks like a blue and white painted headhunter now from across the table. It's really neat.
I will admit that I often don't like the big ships that are painted in a cross-genre paint job.
Yeah, it bugs me a little bit. If you have like a Hello Kitty YT-1300 or something.
Or a Dukes of Hazzard YT-1300 or...
Oh, come on. There was a Rainbow Dash YT-2400 out there that I thought was pretty cool. But then again, that might just be my taste and not the rest of you people. But
he wouldn't be allowed in some of our bathrooms in our state.
Good. Don't even get us started on that discussion. That's for another podcast. This was supposed to be fun.
Let's not go controversial here. Come on, guys.
All right. Okay, so with that, do we want to go into the ready room?
Yeah, let's head to the ready room.
All right, guys, let's go.
Stand by alert. Jet star approved. Estimate time to fire range 15 minutes.
All right. So tonight's main Ready Room mission is Dagobah Dave's Trench Run. And Dagobah Dave is a guy who's been on the forums for a long time and started the game. I know he's involved with game companies and such in the UK. And he's always kind of making up crazy rules and involved with various companies that do things or game shops that can pull off crazy stuff. But he is a guy who actually developed a scenario to recreate the trench run from Episode 4, A New Hope, the end of Star Wars, blowing up the Death Star. And you can find his stuff. He's last updated it in 2014, just to give you an update of how old it is. But it's a blast. It's a lot of fun, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, have you guys played the scenario yet?
Yeah, I've played it a couple times.
Yeah, I've had 2 or 3 runs at it, I think.
Jake?
I haven't had the pleasure of playing it just yet.
Now, when I was creating my local gaming group, and it was just 2 of us, and we were slowly building people, 3 with JBot, I went ahead and I looked online how I could make this fun. Because when you have a good presentation for a game of X-Wing, you can draw people in. And so I went out and I found a graphic that when I printed out, it actually came out in several different pages, but it did like a 2x2 area of Star Wars, of the Death Star top. And so I printed out a bunch of these guys, and I cut them all out and cut the borders off and taped them all together. And I created like these rolls that were maybe like 2 feet by 8 feet rolls of Death Star top. And there's also these towers. So they have towers for the scenario. And I found PDFs for like actual little 3-dimensional towers, and you can buy some. There's all sorts of 3D printed ones, but I'm not a rich man and I'm a cheap man. And I went ahead, I just made a bunch of these, and while I'm on conference calls at work, and I cut them out and glued them together and paper clips, and I built, it must be a bit like 20 of these turrets and stuff, and they're awesome to put out. And so the scenario also have things called power nodes, which take part in the game. They're basically those big balls that you can blow up, look like shield deflectors or whatever. And for those, I had a hard time figuring out what to do. And I found ping pong balls. You just, 4 ping pong balls, you get like $3 at Walmart. And then if you can find one of those pizza companies that still puts those little tables in the box of the pizza, in the middle of the pizza, so it doesn't crush to the middle of the pizza. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So if you can find some of those, wash it and flip it upside down and put the little ping pong ball inside that, it's your power node. And we even set it up.
It actually worked pretty well. It sounds very kind of tossed together, but when you see it all in kind of a collection, it actually looked pretty good.
And we'll try to put some pictures in the show notes and all, so you can see it. I also then even had it. We used some of those the sections for the Warhammer tables where we did the main Death Star higher than the main table, so the trench was actually a 3-dimensional trench that you drop down in. And we printed out section for the walls of the trench and all. So you actually have like the Death Star with turrets and power nodes, and you drop down into the trench. And we had to get like little rulers and things to kind of put, for when a ship is not in the trench, and all sorts of fun stuff. So if you can get it, we used to pull in all sorts of people. People used to come by like, what the heck is this? This is amazing. And if you're looking for ways to kind of build your X-Wing community, I recommend this scenario, and I recommend kind of going the extra mile on not your own home printer and printing all the stuff out to make it interesting.
Oh yeah, this scenario is really cool, and it's really well put together. Like all the rules work very well. There's a couple cracks in the rules that I found, but almost nothing. They're almost just perfect.
Right, which is pretty good. So. Jonathan, you want to talk about, just describe the scenario?
Well, I don't remember all the very specifics of it. I do recall that it was, you were limited in what type of ships you could take. It might have just been X's and Y's on the Rebel side. It's been a while, like I said, since I've actually run it. But
no, you're right. Only X-Wings and Y-Wings for the Rebels.
Right, and only 3 ships for either side were allowed into the trench at one time, if I'm right on that. And there's a lot of other, I don't hate to call it complicated, but rules about how many turns the game lasts to ways to extend that and that sort of thing. And the whole trick obviously is to, in a sense, mimic the movie by getting a single torpedo into the into a. It has stats.
Exhaust
I don't recall what they were into the exhaust port, but it has stats. What was it, like 1 shield and like 1 evade, something like that.
Two shield,
okay.
and 1 evade, and you have to get 1 damage past the shield.
Right. Yeah. It was enough that every time we did it from either side, it was always close, and even though I always lost, that seems to be my running theme here. It really was. In my opinion, just like the movie, it was that one shot. You almost always got that one shot with the torpedo on the thing, and it was like, oh, does it actually make it through the shields? I mean, the one where we thought we had it, we had killed the shields, and the bad roll from the rebels, and the thing evaded. That sounds crazy, but somehow the Death Star moved out of the way, and and that was it. Like that was the last turn, last gasp, and. In a lot of ways, I was like, you know what? If you can't give this thing anything else, you have to give it the fact that it does seem to, in a lot of ways, mimic how the movie wants you to feel, which is this is one shot for the gold, really, and if you miss, that's it. So,
well, I will say that the rebels get 150 points of either X-wings or Y-wings. They have to take Luke Skywalker in a T-65 with R2-D2 as his astromech. Beyond that, you're free to take anything within those parameters that fits. And I think what's interesting is that since this came out, there have been a number of upgrades that could, even really change your composition. Like how many turrets are there and all sorts of stuff. I will say that you do get free torpedoes. All your torpedo slots are filled up for free.
With proton torpedoes.
With proton torpedoes. And so that even gives, with T-65s, they can have to choose between integrated astromech or guidance chip. And Y-wings will get guidance chip. They can just grab that one for free.
Right. It makes the all the rebels have a much better punch with the guidance chips now. I think that's probably pushing the scenario a little more in the rebels' favor since that came out.
Well, but we'll see. But will you want to go with that instead of going with the integrated astromech for the survivability? Because it gets brutal in that trench, I can tell you.
Well, I know which upgrade I want in that trench.
Yeah, right. So we'll have to talk about that. Because, and then, and just to say, for the Imperials, they get 125 points, 135 points, and they have to take Darth Vader in a TIE Advanced, in the list. Now, with that, I think, yes, you give him the X1 title, and he can take one. Take a systems. I say, why would you not give him advanced targeting computer?
Yeah, of course you would do that.
Right. And beyond that, you get only TIE fighters. So you can, you really don't get that many points of TIE fighters to fill out the rest of your list. But when they die, you get any generic TIE fighter can start back in the deployment zone, which basically means you're going to get a Black Squadron TIE fighter to start back at your deployment zone, when it dies.
Right.
And the whole point is there's a countdown. So at the end of the first turn, you mark it down from 6 to 5. And this is the number of turns left before the Moon of Yavin, the Rebel base, is within range for the Death Star shooting it. But every time a TIE fighter blows up, they gain a turn. And
also the power nodes. So if you blow up a power node, you can maybe... there's actually 4 different results. So when you kill a power node, you roll an attack die, and depending on the result, you can always add 1 turn to the countdown timer, but you can also you can do that or disable a turbo laser turret, or give all the Imperial ships a stress token, or remove a shield token from the exhaust port, depending on your result. So you have choice if you manage to take out one of the power nodes, but all the power nodes are on the Imperial half of the board, so you have to fight your way over to them.
Right. If you ever get down to turn 2, the Falcon shows up with a Han Solo and a gunner crew, and you get to. It's the only ship that can fire into the trench. So the Rebel deployment zone pretty much is their entire side of the board. It's like 6 feet of board space, but you can only enter the trench from like as far away from the exhaust port that half of the board. So there's or 1/3 of the board, the farthest 1/3 that you can drop into the trench. So a lot of people start at one corner, but the Falcon can start off where it can race up and basically get like one shot into the trench, and try to save whoever's down there, save Luke.
Right. Yeah, that can be really handy if you get that low in the counter.
Yeah.
Because the Falcon is the only ship that can shoot into the trench. All other ships can't shoot other ships that are in the trench. So it's like the trench and the Death Star surface are two completely different game zones. Effects in one zone don't carry over to the other, then you can't shoot between the zones.
But if you get down to the trench and you get some space, it's going to be hard for anybody to really catch up. Oh, and there are turrets. So all over the top, there are some turrets at each round. They're 4 attack dice. They get no actions, but they can turn 1 focus into a hit. So these guys can be pretty brutal if you let them. Oh, but they also double the green dice of the defender. So even an X-Wing is going to roll 4 green dice.
Right. And the turrets also, I think, shoot at pilot skill 0. And they've got 4 hull and 0 green dice. So, they're pretty easy to kill.
They get killed a lot. They get blown up. And then in the trench, there's actually a template that you print out and put out there. It shows where the towers go, and it shows their kill zone, their firing zone. And so there's a whole bunch of, they cover a lot of the space, not every space, and near the end it overlaps. But basically, the Imperial player at the end of the round can decide, I am going to fire the turrets. And if he does, in the trench, they all fire. And so basically, anybody who's in one of those kill zones gets shot at and has to roll 4 red dice at them. And so it doesn't matter if you're Imperial, it doesn't matter if you're, if you've got Biggs next to you, it doesn't matter. Everybody, including the people next to Biggs, get shot at.
Right.
And so, but those turrets down below can be blown up as well. And a good Rebel player will be able to blow up the turrets and then drop down and blow up the turrets as he goes to try to move up the thing.
Right, and there's dead space in the trench too, the area that's not covered by the turrets. And you know where since the arc of the turrets is printed, and you have a good idea of the range before you, plot your maneuver.
Right, now, and even with setup, the Rebels have the whole their side of the board, so they can actually start right across the trench and try to just race towards it. And the TIE fighters get the back corner near the exhaust port. So basically, they only have a small deployment zone. I think it's like range 5 from the.
Yeah, it's a 1x5 deployment zone.
And they have to race. They have to boogie to get to the trench. And I think you did the math on this, Philip. And
it's tough for them to get in. They can sort of squeak in 3 turns if they have like engine upgrades and things like that. But I'd say they can get in the trench reliably around 4th turn.
And
also the orientation is hard because they're coming at like a diagonal to the trench, and you want to face towards the exhaust port, so they have to do awkward turns in.
Well, no, because when you decide to drop into the trench, you completely reorientate facing the exhaust. You just have to get there. So even just going 5 straight at an angle and trying to barrel roll just to get that much closer is like, you're just booking it. You're trying to go as fast as you can.
Yeah, once you're in the trench, you're obviously trying to get to the exhaust port as quickly as possible. Although if you're able to correctly guess as the defender, not as the defender, but as the Rebel is in the trench, I could definitely see you hitting the brakes and letting the TIE fighters fly on past, like Top Gun move.
Yeah.
If you manage to feint the Imperial into that, but could also backfire if they don't go far enough forward. So if they're not right behind you already, that could definitely backfire.
And so what usually happens is, because as the Rebels, as J-Bot said, you get only how many ships in the trench at one time?
I think it was 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, so
like
each
3 per side.
Yeah.
3 per side. So you can't have all of your entire fleet sail in. So 3 can go in, and the rest of them have to either just kind of skirmish with the TIE fighters or probably go for power nodes, because you take turns placing the power nodes on the far side of the trench, and trying to blow them up.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of variety for the Rebel players in strategy. So, like, part of it is, do you go for all named guys, or do you try to fill it with as many more generics to fill it out? Do you go for the Y-Wings that are slower, but they've got 2 torpedoes, or do you go for, 1 torpedo and faster? And I can tell you that every game I've played, the Rebels have run out of torpedoes. I played the game 5-6 times, and the Rebels have always lost.
I don't know what to tell you. I've played this game solo maybe 4 or 5 times now, and always managed to win with the Rebels. I don't know. There's some disconnect there.
Well,
could be very well because
obviously the force is strong with one of you.
I usually play in a group, so we've got at least 4 people involved.
Yeah.
Often I'm not even. I'm just game mastering and running it, and keeping things moving. Sometimes people are new, sometimes they're experienced, sometimes it's a mix. So it's all sorts of crazy, but
yeah, I could see it. Maybe it's because my scenario kung fu is strong, just because I work with scenarios so much. But it's as Rebels, there's no reason for you to delay your trench run, right? You should just blast on in there as fast as possible. The first time that I played the scenario, when I was building my list for everyone, the first thing I did was actually put engine upgrade on 3 X-Wings, and instead of guidance chips or integrated astromech, and I think I had Luke, Wedge, and Biggs, and I had a little triangle formation set up with Biggs on the right, so that when they entered the trench, Biggs would be in front, which might give him a little bit of a defensive advantage. If he's further away from the TIE fighters shooting at him, right? That's the best spot for Biggs, because then he might get a range bonus, as opposed to the movies where he was behind.
Right.
And with engine upgrade, you can get into the trench on turn 2 very reliably as the Rebels. It's not that hard. You put in a 4 straightforward boost, 3 turn, and then you're in the trench. Meanwhile, the Imperials are burning as hard as they can for the trench, but they're just they're hopelessly too far behind. And they can outrun you when they're in the trench, but just having the Rebels in there so fast really clinched it. I was able to launch at least 2 torpedoes whenever I was running with engine upgrades. So
yeah, and I'll say I never took engine upgrade because it just didn't seem in flavor of of recreating it, and not just in flavor, but it seems broken. It seems like
I can confirm that.
Yeah. I'm glad I never played it, and I just think never allowing engine upgrade is a thing to do.
Yeah, if I was going to go and rewrite the scenario, then one of the first things I would do is to either outright ban engine upgrade or require players to take integrated astromech or guidance chips or something on their X-Wings.
Mm. Right. And with that, like when every time I've played, it comes down to 1 X-Wing heading down the trench, TIE fighters on his tail, and he takes that one shot, and most of the time it's Luke, but one time it was just like a Red Squadron guy. And they get down there, and they fire, and they totally brick. And they just it's as if they roll, they can get it. Scrub, they get nothing. And if they had guidance chip, they might have won.
Yeah, I usually take Wedge and Luke and Biggs. Wedge is
the classic team.
Yeah, exactly. So it's it's the canonical team. But Wedge is really good at killing the exhaust port. Luke is more survivable because he's got R2 and his ability makes him more survivable. And Biggs helps keep them alive if they get any pursuit down the trench.
I think most of the times I've seen it is the Rebels go and put Y-Wings first because they think the Y-Wings have 2 torpedoes, the Y-Wings have turrets, send the Y-Wings down, and the X-Wings then to try to blow up the nodes and distract the TIE fighters up top.
Huh.
And that's what I've seen happen. They try to do a lot with that, but
I always went for the opposite. I always had the X-Wings in the trench because they can go the fastest, and sent the Y-Wings either to block up TIE fighters trying to enter the trench, or to go after power nodes, or to try and ace a TIE fighter with a proton torpedo to extend time and keep them from getting into the trench.
I will say the last time we played, there was at least, as soon as the dice started flying, there was at least a TIE fighter killed a turn. And there was just a sorry train of replacement Black Squadron guys that were just coming up. And that turn marker, even though they lost, it never dropped below 5, I don't think.
Yeah.
So
they just run out of torpedoes or something?
Yeah, well, because the Rebels don't bring back replacements. And so...
Yeah, the Rebels can run out.
It was an attrition battle.
Exactly. So when the Rebels start dying, and it always came down to... Like even the last game, they had an X-wing fire a torpedo at a power node. I'm like, look, it's got 2 hull and no agility.
You should just be using your primaries.
Right, and then that one guy could have then gone back and dropped in the trench, but he'd used his torpedoes. So there was no torpedoes left for like the 2 or 3 ships that were left. There was no torpedoes left after Luke fired and blew his shot. His money shot was not good.
Yeah.
So. But I will say there's a few things you can take that I didn't do, but that might change things. So if you're in a Y-Wing, you can now actually take the bomb option.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I'm conflicted because if you have a free proton torpedo, right?
Yeah.
And bombs can be nice, but I'm not sure which bomb would be best for, to take into the trench. Maybe an ion bomb, because then maybe you could slow down your pursuers.
Or even a mine. Drop a seismic charge.
Or a mine. Yeah, a seismic charge, but that's just 1 damage. That's not going to be...
No, that's dice.
Oh, a seismic charge?
I'm thinking, sorry.
Oh, you mean the cluster mines?
Yeah. Not the cluster, but I'm thinking proximity mines.
Proximity, yeah. I mean, any of those would be useful. Maybe 3. Actually, maybe Y-wings with cluster mines would be best because they could just have a ton of those things out there.
Right. I don't know if those would be broken or not. But at this, I'd have to see. So I think I think it depends if you're playing with experienced players or with newbies. Because I think if you're with newbies, I think the Rebels might have a harder time. But if you go with someone who's got like laser focus, get in that trench and make a run for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's what we did. I think the second time we ran as Rebels it was purely we're just going to charge full bore to the trench itself, dive in and make our kind of one run at the thing and. We had bad luck with dice rolls is really what killed us in that one.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the winning strategy.
Yeah, you need the kind of the extra guys to really, like you said, send 3 into the trench and have everybody else that you've got on your team basically just play mop up, trying to keep you time on the counter.
Right.
Because it does take, like you said, if with the engine boost you're talking 2 turns, but we never had them, so it was 3 turns realistically to get to the trench, and it's only a 6-turn counter. So you're looking at we got to fly as fast as we can down this trench.
First turn doesn't count though.
Yeah, but still we have to fly as fast as we can down the trench just to make sure we get really 2 good shots at the exhaust port. And It was always close, and we did lose each time, but it did come down to dice rolls, which it always hurts. But
and if you can get the ties,
good.
You can get like a Backstabber who's just going to do amazing in the trench, and you get like a Mauler Mythal who can get up at range 1 and start just unloading 4 dice into a Y-wing,
right?
And
Darth Vader with that advanced targeting computer.
Oh yeah, with the advanced targeting, he's even more
nasty.
brutal. Yeah, because he can target lock and focus every round, and
you could give him outmaneuver or something.
Yeah. And another one, who is it? Scourge. Scourge gets an extra damage dice if you're damaged. So if you're like in a Y-wing or something, boom, that helps. So those TIE fighters can get pretty brutal, and they're fast. If they get down in there, they 5 forward, sure.
Yeah, they can catch up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my summary analysis of this scenario is that the mechanics are really well constructed. The game works really well, but it has a little bit of a. I mean, I think it has a problem in that the decision making is really straightforward on both sides. To me, that's what it seems to me anyway. It seems like the rebels should immediately make a strong trench run with whatever ships they have. Send maybe a couple ships to attack power nodes, whatever they have left that they can't throw into the trench. And they just have to hope that their dice don't crap out or something terrible doesn't happen in the trench and they make it to the end.
Now, in this scenario, Phil, is it possible to destroy the Death Star in that first trench run that you make if you roll well?
Yeah, sure.
It is, okay.
You can destroy it in one shot with a proton torpedo.
Right, because it's basically got 2 shield and 1 green die evade. And so let's say it blanks out and it's evade, and you get 3 damage through to it, which is what average is.
Yeah.
That's average shot would be, hit, focus, blank, and then, that turns into a crit with a proton torpedo. And then if you've got guidance ship, that's 4. But yeah, so every time it turns out it's either like they rolled just enough, like they rolled that 1 evade that stopped it, or the rebels rolled crappy enough that I saw it. Now, I did see, the last time people played, they raced up to it, but that last turn they slow rolled and opened fire, and so the TIE fighters came in. It was a killing zone, and they just busted them up. And then what happened was they only dropped 2 X-wings down, and then 1 TIE fighter came down, and they spent a couple turns trying to slow roll and get behind it. And if they had just bolted, if they put 3 ships down there and just gunned it, there were so many casualties among the TIE fighters that that was Mauler Mythal, and he would rip people up. But if you put 3 ships down there, I think they could have gone and they could have done it. I think they could have gotten through. But so I don't think it's necessarily just rushing to the end, and that's the only option, because I think there is nuance if you get clever. It's just you do have to be moving, and you do have to put 3 ships in, not 2 ships, and things like that. And part of it I found also is the rebels would go and try to blow up the power nodes as fast as possible. But the thing is, if you get it up to 6, it doesn't go higher than 6 turns away. And sometimes you want to save a power node for a little bit later in the game. If you can blow up 2 power nodes in 1 round, don't do it, because it's going to bump. It's not going to have as much of an impact if the clock's not really low. You might need to kind of stay alive and save that 1 power node.
Yeah, I think that killing TIE fighters is better for you than going after the power nodes, generally speaking. Because the power nodes don't shoot back at you, and as the rebel and killing TIE fighters delays the clock, just like killing a power node would. And you really need to stay. One of the big main problems is the rebel ships dying.
Right. And then which ships do you go with? Do you go for a lot of cheap generics, or do you go for Garvin Dries, who throws a focus? Do you go with Dutch, who gives out a target lock? Do you go with go with Wedge, because he's going to get the shots in? But
Wes. It was like a Star Trek crossover for a second.
No, I think
who's this Wes they speak of?
Well, what's the other guy?
Wes Jansen.
Yeah, Wes Jansen. There is an X-Wing pilot, Wes.
Oh, I stand corrected.
But every time I see people,
I feel like I need to know more about the pilots that are in this scenario.
Well, before we get to that, do you go with the name guys? Because I've seen Wedge get shot out really early, and then when you go with say Y-wings, do you go with what turret options? We've got a lot of turret options these days. What if you want auto blaster turret? Because if you get those TIE fighters close in your tail, an auto blaster turret's going to shoot through, and you go with something like ion turret. Sometimes those 3 dice in a focus, they just evade those dang turret shots. And ions can be a bit expensive. You go TLTs, or now there's
yeah.
I think we had ions because the ions did something like they blew the turrets up or the power nodes up with just a single shot, didn't they? They had a more powerful effect. But I think the first time we did it with as many named as we could, because I remember having Porkins and some of the other guys in the list as well. So I think we did go for as much flavor as we could the first time we ran it.
Yeah, I think that flavor aside, there are some interesting things you could do with Y-wings and turrets in the trench. Maybe you could have a formation with 2 guys in the back row with auto blaster turrets, or maybe dorsal turrets. And then the guy in the front of the formation with a twin laser turret. So the TIE fighters would be close to your back row and get shot by your dorsal turrets or your auto blasters. And the guy in the front would be able to maintain good twin laser turret range because the back guys are screening. So that could be pretty effective. And that could really screw up the Imperials' game. If you start killing a lot of TIE fighters in the trench.
Yeah.
Because it would take so long for them to get back in there, they would never reach you in time to keep you from shooting the exhaust port.
I think it's different strategies, and I think it's actually fun to do as a group, like a group game. When you get 4, 5, 6 people playing, and just kind of people walk up, here, take these 2 ships, and just kind of fly through and have fun with it, Like, I always had it with not the most competitive, players, and just everyone having a good time, and the Rebels have always lost. So I think, I don't know, I think you could do different stuff. I think it could be fun.
Definitely, I think it works pretty well as a casual scenario. If you don't approach it competitively, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
But even competitively in this, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think
I wouldn't say bad.
Yeah.
I'd say there's chinks in the armor that you can definitely exploit. Engine upgrade being the most important one.
Well, Jonathan, let me ask you, what turrets would you take on Y-wings?
On this scenario specifically, or just in general? I guess it depends on what your plan is. I mean, it sounds like the overall kind of experience plan for this is really just to go as hard as you can with. You probably do it mostly with X-wings, but if I were to take wise, I personally, I'm a huge fan of the ions because you can basically hover over the entrance to the trench itself, because there is that cutoff point, and just keep anything from really getting there. If once you kill a couple ties and they have to start feeding them back in, then if you have 1 or 2 Ys just kind of keeping their distance over that thing with ion turrets, nothing's really going to get through, and that gives your guys in the trench as much time as they need really to peck away at it with guns or shoot it with the actual rockets or
they have to
torpedoes.
Shoot torpedoes. I think nothing else even goes through.
Yeah, so it's no, I thought you could knock the shields down with your primaries though, but maybe
you can't. You have to shoot with the proton torpedo. Only the proton torpedo.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would ever slow roll it. Then that would be seems a little strange.
Because there are times if you've got like the TIE fighters in your tail and they think you're going to gun it and you slow roll it 1, it's like putting the brakes on some of these TIE fighters in front of you. And part of the thing is if you're down the trench and you can kill the TIE fighters,
it's much harder for them to get back in and get back to where you are because you have such a head start.
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah.
So they're going to be back at the beginning and drop down and speed up, and it takes a while to do that. So if you can, if you can either limit them getting into the trench and send some people down, or kill them when you're in there, you have a much better chance.
Yeah,
But I would think for point saving reasons, I don't even know that I would want to go as high as the points for TLTs and ion cannons in that instance, just because it feels like that if you're going to use the Y-wings, you're really just wanting them for those extra torpedo slots more than you are the turrets and stuff. And
those turrets can be so useful in the trench, though.
Yeah, they can be, but it sounds like everybody's decided it's a 3X wing race. Get them into the trench and gun it as fast as you can down to the end. And
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it works, but I think that there's definitely room for an interesting Y-wing squad going down the trench and working very well.
Yeah,
Jake, what would you put on your Y-wings?
Geez, I mean that's a tough one. I'm kind of particular to the ion cannons on Y-wings just in general because I feel like it's kind of thematic. I never got into the twin link turrets myself personally, even though I know they're hugely popular, or at least used to be. But I think ion, just the idea of control sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean it can be nice, but it depends a bit on the pilot skill of the TIE fighters and things like this. Because like imagine you're in the trench, you're a Y-wing, there's a TIE fighter on your tail. If you hit the TIE fighter with an ion turret, then it's going to be ionized. It has an ion token. It's going to do a 1 straight next turn.
Right.
If the TIE fighter is really close to you and moving first, as lower pilot skill than you, then he's going to bump into you and he's going to lose his action, and he's not going to move very far forward. But if you move first, then the TIE fighter, he has to take a 1 forward, but as a Y-wing, the fastest you can do without getting stressed is a 3 straight. So you're not going to lose that TIE fighter. He's still going to be back there, and he's still going to be able to shoot you, and he's still going to have an action.
It is a very good point. It's a valid point. I guess in the trench, maybe not as feasible. It's not like he's going to be immobile and not do anything.
And part of it is points. I looked at Auto Blaster turret is only 2 points.
It's very cheap, yeah.
And it's a cheap little thing, and putting one of those in the trench is not a bad idea. Dorsal turret's 3 points, and it's not as good as the Auto Blaster turret for attacks, particularly against a 3 green dice ship, but, it's still cheap and it gives them something, so.
Yeah. And it works at range, too.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that bombs would be too much or would be interesting, or?
I feel like unless you plan it right, they're just going to cause havoc for yourself. But if you're basically throwing everything into that one run, if you're planning it and saying, okay, we just got to get 3 ships in the right order, then I could see, hey, we need a trailing Y-wing that's just going to be a nuisance with the bombs of one shape, size, or description. The ion, the nets, the Connor nets, I'm not really... I'm not sold on them. I don't like them, but in that trench, they might be perfect because of the way they drop out. Yeah, and obviously the ion not being able to take an action, and that would be good. Also, anything really is going to stuff up the spot, like the cluster mines and even proximities are going to really do nasty things in the trench because it's so confined.
I certainly think the movie would have been a lot more interesting. It had Y-wings been dropping bombs while they're going down that turret
backwards.
Yeah.
The TIE fighters
would have been very interesting.
Yeah.
I will say a couple weeks ago, I started a thread about this whole mission, and I didn't get a lot of feedback, which is disappointing. But I think I found it interesting that when you think about the mission, there's a lot of standard X-Wing pilots, Y-Wing, and TIE fighter pilots that are normally considered the go-to that really kind of aren't as interesting in this particular mission. Like Hell Runner, everyone always takes Hell Runner. Why would you ever take TIE fighters without Hell Runner? But you're not in a formation. And, is she really worth her lots of points for it?
No.
Yeah, not generally.
No,
right.
Not really.
And like Dark Curse, where he, it's harder to kill him. But is anyone actually really shooting too much at the TIE fighters? It kind of puts a different priority onto, which TIE fighters are interesting and which X-Wings as well. Like Wedge is good if he's the one who lives and gets to the end to shoot, and he's great at killing TIE fighters, but he also is a target number 1 on his forehead when you've got TIE fighters coming up. And, he's a lot of points for an X-Wing. And there's cheaper options. You can go for, other lower stuff. And so what TIE fighter did you pick? And Garvin Dre's kind of goes up significantly because he could pass off those focus tokens, which is fantastic when you're in a trench.
Yeah. There's a lot of options that become pretty good, specifically for a trench run, because the engagement is so, very well defined and different from most dogfights in X-Wing.
And different EPTs, elite pilot talents, are different options that you take. You might want something, a little unusual.
Yeah. Outmaneuver, definitely, for TIE fighters pursuing. I used a lot of the Predator EPT, which isn't exactly a departure from standard X-Wing theory, but I used Predator on my trench running X-Wings because it would help them kill turrets along the way and make a really good attack on the exhaust port at the end of the trench run.
Well, okay, so there's a question of that. Would it or would it not? Because if these guys have no pilot skill, if the turrets in the trench aren't even things, do you still get to re-roll the dice? Do you get?
Oh yeah. It's an interesting question. Like I played it just re-rolling one die against the turrets because their pilot skill isn't technically defined. But you always get at least one re-roll with the Predator. So
yeah, I gave because I made both lists up, and I had Luke and Biggs, and I went down together. And the idea was that once Biggs is dead, then Luke needs his Lone Wolf, but isn't needed until then. And he had his Lone Wolf, and he still got the reroll at the end. He still loved it. It still is no good. But overall, I think this particular mission is interesting. To play it, the same game differently. That makes sense.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of things you can do differently in this.
All right. So, we might have exhausted the tactical discussion. I love that aspect of all the different options and how do you do it, and I think there is nuance there. But
let's hear more about the background of the Battle of Yavin and the trench run itself.
Darth Vader. A great disturbance in my little friend.
Don't get excited.
You must feel the force around you.
This is ridiculous.
For 800 years have I trained Jedi.
It's a good story.
Welcome to Storytime. I'm Jake Freed, Chief Engineer of Shuttle Tydirium, and I'll be taking you to a historic time in a faraway place. Today's history lesson will take us to the legendary Battle of Yavin. Now, in this battle, we see both the Rebellion and the Empire face off during the Galactic Civil War. The battle had high stakes for both sides, and though the Imperials didn't quite grasp the gravity of the situation at that time, they did have very high stakes in that battle, as everyone soon found out. Now, for the Imperial Navy, the objective was simple. We reach Yavin 4 and use the Death Star super laser to destroy the entire moon and all of the Rebellion along with it. The Rebellion, using the stolen plans that Leia Organa had delivered, needed to destroy that battle station by destroying the reactor core. Now, in order to do this, they had to launch proton torpedoes into an exhaust port that was just a mere 2 meters across.
Jake, that's no bigger than a Womp Rat.
I know, but in order
so I'm sure somebody can shoot Womp Rats, whatever that was. I can't do that quote.
I used to shoot Womp Rats that size back in my T16 back home.
Nah, that's impossible.
There you go.
For a computer.
Now, not only that, but in order to get to that point, they had to fly down a long and defended trench before reaching that sweet spot to launch the torpedoes. And, that long trench, as we've come to love and know as the trench run. Now, may the force be with whoever had to make such an insanely crazy shot, as Jim knows all too well. Let's talk about the difficulties that each side had to face. So the Rebellion had to fight against an enormous battle station, 120 kilometers across, and armed to the teeth. They had to pull off one heck of a shot in order to destroy that whole thing. And they had every Rebellion life riding on the battle, as it didn't seem that anyone tried to evacuate Yavin 4 before or even during the battle. The Empire, on the other hand, had to be patient. Yavin, which was the giant gas giant, the red one, was conveniently in the way, and it was going to take 30 minutes to orbit before they could fire on the small moon with the rebel base. Now, initially, this seemed to be the only problem they had to face, but Darth Vader soon realized the threat to the station, or as I like to imagine it, the secondary hidden objective, going out and killing the fighters. So the rebels had 30 ships to start, and since they were smaller fighters, the powerful turbo lasers couldn't actually target them effectively. Turbo lasers were better equipped with dealing with larger, slower-moving vessels, and in fact, the Death Star, when it was originally conceived and built, it was designed to repel fleets of ships, and really not small attack squadrons.
Right, because it doubles the green evade dice, and epic ships don't have green evade dice, so it's,
Exactly. So, in the end, the hubris of the Imperial Command ended up being the death of the Death Star. So who was part of this great battle? All right, well, we had the Rebellion, and they had Luke Skywalker, the famous Luke Skywalker, or a.k.a. Red 5, piloting one of the X-Wings. Other members of Red Squadron include the iconic characters such as Biggs Darklighter and Wedge Antilles, both of whom accompanied Luke when he went into that famous trench run. We also know, the lovable Porkins, right? I mean, you can't talk about the trench run without mentioning Porkins. Additionally, other than the X-Wings that were involved in the battle, we already mentioned that there were Y-Wings, as we mentioned in this scenario. That was Gold Squadron, and they flew against the Death Star as well. Now, for the Imperials, our notable character starts with none other than Darth Vader. Darth Vader led the very dangerous Black Squadron TIE fighter pilots. That's right. Two of my favorite pilots, which I believe you had already mentioned, Jim, were also present here. They were Backstabber and Mauler Mithil, and both of them are, very, very seasoned pilots and very dangerous pilots. And they were the two pilots that were Darth Vader's wingmen when he went into the trench run.
They were specially trained to work with Darth Vader.
Oh yes, I mean he doesn't fly with any willy-nilly wingmen, mind you. He handpicks, and all of his other wingmen he probably force choked to death. So both these pilots flew as the wingmen to him as he mercilessly cut down the rebels during the trench run. Now, there were plenty of casualties for both sides. In fact, if it wasn't for Han Solo's epic intervention, the Rebellion casualties would have been total: 30 ships, including Luke Skywalker, and a moonful of Rebel command staff. But since the handsome smuggler did manage to kill Backstabber with a few good backstabbing shots, and made poor Mauler, panic and send Vader's TIE Advance spinning off to safety, the Rebellion prevailed with Luke's magic 90-degree proton torpedoes. Now, the Imperial casualties, well, the estimates are hazy at best, but it is somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million Imperial citizens. Holy force, that's a lot of people Luke just murdered in that one little trench run.
There were that many people on the Death Star?
That's right. The estimates are about 2 to 2.5, and not all of those. In fact, about the estimate is somewhere around 2 million that weren't even like in the army or even in the Stormtrooper Corps. Staff. They were like support staff and engineers, like me, just doing my job. Janitors cleaning toilets, man.
Oh man, that's horrible.
I heard the Rylek roaming circus was actually on board.
They were probably there just for like the grand opening too. That's horrible. Right. Just booked by their agent without even realizing what they're getting themselves into.
We see a lot of propaganda from the Rebellion at the end of Episode 4. The awards going out, and the Luke Skywalker and Chewbacca and Han Solo and everyone getting the medals and standing up. But what we don't see is that mass funeral. That mass gravesite where Palpatine has to go out and take a knee down those 2 million gravestones on Coruscant that he put somewhere. That's what conveniently gets left out of the HoloNet.
Right, that shot of him dropping that orchid was just touching.
It really was. So to wrap it up, the Battle of Yavin was an insanely significant victory for the Rebellion, as it was the first major and decisive victory against the Empire. The Empire, wounded but not destroyed, learned a very painful, costly, and humbling lesson. Or maybe they didn't, seeing as they did opt to build a second one. But nevertheless, the Battle of Yavin, and specifically the Trench one, was one of the most thrilling space battles in the Star Wars universe. That's all for now. Back to you, Chadwick.
Well, actually, I have a question. So I know there's always some contention between EU, Extended Universe, and switching over to Disney and the canon. I have heard, but I'm not sure, that Disney changed it so that Cinderella's castle was actually on Yavin 4. Is that true?
I believe that rumor is correct. Yes.
Okay, so Luke not only saved the universe, but he saved Cinderella as well, which is excellent.
Don't give them any ideas. They might show up in an extended cut on the road a little bit.
Right.
I think from a non, I guess, encyclopedic version of it, the thing that fascinates me is that, at least in the larger scale of this, and I mentioned this before the podcast, is that this became, at least in the lore of the universe, like the cut point that we see these days between BCE and AD. This before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin and the timeline. And
correct.
And it's interesting. Before I kind of learned all this, you would see that sometimes you'd go to like Wikipedia or places and they would be like, this is XYZ BBY. And you're like, what the hell does BBY mean? I'm like, so you start digging into it. Oh, the battle. Oh, that kind of makes sense. So the whole universe, at least as you see it in the present day of the game and the movies, is all kind of centered around that pivotal point in the history. And so it is a very, very big deal in the I guess, at least the recent history of the universe that is Star Wars.
Now, huge deal, especially since, from the Rebellion standpoint, yes, they did get that major victory, but it was also, taking a stick and hitting the hornet's nest. I mean, in the whole, Empire Strikes Back, I mean, they really did strike back. The Empire Strikes Back was a really terrible movie for the Rebellion, when you think about it. A lot of bad things happened there.
Act 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, often forgotten is in all the celebratory bits, post and before. It's like, wait a minute, they really did, like you said, kick the hornet's nest and kind of get some stuff thrown back in their faces. So it's
a lot of rebels die in all the movies.
Now, I actually wanted to go back and talk about some of the TIE Fighter, because there's 3 TIE Fighter pilots from the game that are actually in this. I will say Wampa is technically Black 11, but he wasn't around until the Battle of Endor. So they still had Black Squadron later, but the ones that we have are Mauler Mithil, Backstabber, and Dark Curse. Now, Backstabber is probably the one with the least details. He was the one blown up by Han Solo. He was a Corellian, because apparently half the TIE Fighter, half the pilots in the galaxy are from Corellia. And he was also known for his viciousness. Now, the other guy, Mauler Mithil. Mauler is actually in quotes, so that was his nickname.
Correct.
And
so wait, are you saying that, like, Backstabber was born as a backstabber? Like, that was his
well, okay, no, Backstabber
given name by the Emperor?
But I wasn't sure Mauler Mithil, like, if that was his name, like, Mr. Mithil, please call me Mauler. You never know.
That's true. You never know. It's probably like Maul 'R, and it's pronounced
Darth
Maul.
So... But he actually had speaking words in the movie.
That's right.
He said, "Look out!" And then died.
That's my dream role in one of these movies. Either that or as you get blown up.
But you just do your your death crumple forward towards the camera with sparks flying behind you.
Yeah, and just think if that was you now. You say, hey, what were you in the movie? I only saw it. That was 3 seconds, but I've got a pilot card in the X-Wing tabletop game.
Oh, yeah.
Live on forever.
Exactly.
Now, Mauler Mithil was an experienced veteran, actually, in the Imperial Navy, and he actually has racked up 27 kills prior to the Battle of Yavin. And he apparently marked them all with flames painted onto the whole of his fighter. So if you really want to have a cool TIE fighter, get out that magnifying glass and that one-haired brush to paint those little paints. But he also had a son.
No, don't do that at all.
Don't
be that guy.
Don't tell J-Bud. But he also had a son that was on an Imperial ship that he kept a hollow picture of his son on the control yoke of his TIE fighter. So he wasn't completely heartless. He was just a man doing his job. Support the troops. But also Dark Curse. He was blown up. He was the one that got behind Luke, who said, I can't shake him. I can't shake him. And had to have Wedge come in and blast him up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he actually also distinguished himself thoroughly, having survived numerous battles against rebel-held worlds, and like Mon Calamari and such. And he was assigned to Black Squadron, but this is where he gets cliche, because it was actually his last station. He was planning on retiring from military service, and he only had one more combat mission to fly before he retired.
Oh, Riggs got him killed after all.
Yeah.
And Wedge killed him. And there's even
too old for this.
There's even theories, because Major Turfanier, the interceptor pilot, hates Wedge Antilles because Wedge killed his older brother. And it's rumored or supposed that perhaps Dark Curse is Major Turfanier's older brother.
That would be pretty nice, juicy gossip there.
Yeah. And then lastly, there's a black-suited Imperial officer, Lieutenant Tanbris, who walks up and says, Lord Vader, we prepared your TIE fighters, or, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And he actually was like a really good combat pilot until he got wounded, and he had to retrain as like a fleet tactician. So he's part of Black Squadron as their lieutenant, but he used to fly with him, and he was always kind of let down that he didn't get to fly with him.
Mm-hmm.
So just thought a little bit of information with that.
Well,
that's good. Yeah. One of the 2 million.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, and another thing about the movie, when we watched the movies again with my son, my 10-year-old son, before episode 7, he caught the beginning of, because we're talking about pilots in this battle, and Wedge Antilles, the beginning of episode 4, when Princess Leia's gone and Darth Vader chokes out Captain Antilles. And my son caught it, goes, Antilles, like Wedge Antilles. And yes, that was his dad, who got killed by Darth Vader.
Huh.
So
it very much was a civil war. Brothers against brothers, fathers against sons.
Or Vader against everybody.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
All right.
So I was going to go into a little of the scenario making aspects of this whole trench run, because the whole trench run and the basic scenario concept behind it is one that shows up a lot in scenario design. So I think let's go into the my little scenario design studio.
I do believe they think I am some sort of god. How rude!
I've just about had enough of you.
Great. So let's talk about the trench run. I've always kind of had a problem with it, in that it just never made a whole lot of sense to me, right? The rebel ships go into the trench, only 3 ships at a time. Meanwhile, everyone else is flying around above them. Don't seem to be doing anything particularly important. And the Imperials, instead of shooting down into the trench from above it, follow them in the trench and take, like forever to line up their shots. And meanwhile, the rebels never try and like attack the Imperials who are attacking their friends in the trench. No one is covering anybody else. And the rebels, even though they know that the exhaust port is tiny and really hard to hit, seem content to just send 3 ships at a time and not, just send... I don't know why they didn't, if no one's going to cover the guys in the trench, why doesn't everyone just go into the trench and, line up? We'll all take a crack at it. We've all got torpedoes. Why not? So, it just never made sense to me, even in the movie. and it's not as though no one can shoot down into the trench, because that's exactly what Han Solo did, right?
True.
He was the only one thinking with his brain.
Yeah.
They're like, just shoot them, guys. They're right there. They're flying in a straight line.
It does make some kind of sense. Well, it's always a question I've had, not being the technical side of the ships, but X-Wings, do they have the ability to actually traverse up and down like the cannons without moving the ship? Does that make sense? Like,
No,
like the turret has the ability. You makes sense, the ability to, I can go up, down. It has all of the axes to kind of work with, versus I've got to actually point my ship up or down to shoot at something. To me, that was the only way it kind of made sense in my head as a kid growing up was, well, the other ships obviously can't shoot down in there, because then they would just accidentally fly into the trench at the same time. So you don't want to do that.
Up. I don't know.
Right. Well, you have to aim down for just a second and then kind of like what Han, that's basically what Han did is just kind of swoop in, take a shot, and swoop back out. But,
that's
you're right. Why didn't everybody do that?
Yeah. We see, the way I figured it was that the X-Wings attacked, but there were a lot more TIE fighters, and basically they were trying to send as many as they could down in the trench without being obvious, because they didn't want to alert what they're trying to do, because if they analyze their attack positions, they might recognize that there's a weakness. And so if the TIE fighters all ganged up and just hovered over, they could blast everybody out of the trench like nobody's business. Right, so the majority of the ships were trying to distract and keep back all of the TIE fighters, so that the few that were making the run could go through, without anybody getting on their case. And only a few of the TIE fighters went behind them and blasted them. And then by the time that you finally get to the end, they're kind of exhausted both sides' resources, or at least of the TIE fighters that flew out there and that could get there in time. So then you had Luke running down, and there was only a few TIE fighters left that kind of come up behind him. And it was Darth Vader, and he's like, rest of the guys, back off. Me and my boys, we're going to take them. And so no one else is going in the trench. And then that's when Han Solo jumps up and nobody expects him. Smuggler, zips in and blasts it. And so, I don't know, it didn't seem too outrageous to me, but.
Well, I will say this, and, Phil, I think you bring up excellent points, and I do agree with you on most of it. One thing to consider is, turbo lasers tend not to be so good against those smaller sub-fighters, the X-Wings and Y-Wings. But a Corellian freighter that just enters the scene, you'd think that the turbo lasers would have been like, hey, there's something I can hit, and blast it out of the sky before it even got anywhere near that. That's one interesting fact. The other thing too is Imperial hubris. My God, Tarkin, he makes me wince to this day. Did not even want to engage the fighters. Like, nah, doesn't worry, doesn't bother me.
Right, only Darth Vader sent.
Yeah, Vader was like, okay, let me go out and kill them. But even having said that, when they were out in the fight, actually, the amount of supposedly, and this is something that I had read up on, supposedly the amount of Rebel fighters actually outnumbered the amount of TIE fighters in that battle, because Darth Vader only brought his small detachment from Black Squadron, because Tarkin didn't give a hoot. He said, it doesn't matter. So really all that Vader could muster was his small little detachment. And again, he's also guilty of hubris because of just like what you said, Jim, where he's like, I'll leave this to me, everyone else back. And,
why couldn't let the buddies shoot? They're combat veterans. They've flown like 20 missions. They got like 50 Rebel kills between them. They could have, swept all, the Rebels off the table.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
It does sound like that.
Vader wanted a few more kills.
Yeah, that's right. The kill stealer. That's what this is. That's what it all boils down to.
That's exactly it.
Well, that's why they're specially trained not to shoot.
Yeah,
that's right. Your job is to get in the way and absorb fire.
The other thing too, again, which you mentioned, Phil, was sending 3 ships at a time. Sending the TIE fighters in after them. Not only is that kind of like, okay, you're chasing them down, why don't you have everybody? But now all those front-facing turbo lasers have to shut off, because now they have to risk friendly fire. They can't fire down the trench and just not worry about hitting anything.
But they weren't hitting anything in the first place.
Which is also so true. So granted,
it does. Yeah, we could dig over the whole craziness of that scenario, but I understand what you're getting at with the why can I only send 3 ships in. My only guess is that two things. One, that's basically what they did in the movie. And in the movie, it was like 3 ships wide, wasn't it? It looked like 3 ships could barely kind of make it through with any kind of reasonable margin of
but
relative
you had
safety.
just flying behind.
Right, yeah. And so they're like, okay, well, I'm guessing the scenario Dagobah Dave said, you know what? Well, let's keep it to 3 to kind of keep it with the flavor of the movie, and realistically, that's about how wide the trench is in the game.
Actually, I suspect that he made that rule for a different reason. I think he made that rule as a balance, to have balance in the scenario, because if you allowed everyone to go into the trench at the same time, then you could have a group of rebels covering for another group of rebels further ahead in the trench, and you could have, it would be an advantage for the rebels because they would be able to at least temporarily give a few of their ships cover.
Right. Well, if you've got like 5 ships
shot,
in the trench, all the TIE fighters behind them just wouldn't be able to kill them fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
That's what I think. Also, I think it would have been too crazy and end up crowded in that trench, just in terms of the tabletop.
But my question, I guess another question I have is, what do you think the whole setting up of the Imperials being pushed to one side and the Rebels given essentially one entire table edge, was that set up specifically to make it so the Imperials would always be in after the Rebels? Like,
it could be, yeah.
There was no other reasoning behind that than we got to make sure that the Rebels, because the first time we played it, we set it up wrong, and we basically put the Imperials on the other end, and they had a straight, basically as easy a shot in as the Rebels did, and we're like, something's not right here. They got on us super fast, and like we obviously lost, and we're like, we can't. We got one ship into the thing, and we get blown up, and that's my guess, is that he moved it to that end, limited it so that they would have to be second. And,
I think that was a balanced decision, I think.
Yeah, but it still feels like a lot of it was done for kind of canon reasons as well. As we got to make sure the Imperials are second, that they're not in front, kind of playing a blocking type of game of get in front and just slow down the pace and block up the thing while the timer.
Well, I could see for the Rebels, if they went for it, they could put like 2 ships in the front going fast, because when the Rebels go in, they try to go in as close to the drop down point, closest to the exhaust port as they can to drop down. But what if they had like another ship go to the end and drop down? And so that this guy can actually slow roll and make sure they get Imperials in front of him, and he can come up behind a couple TIE fighters while they're gunning for, let's say, the Y-wings.
Yeah, that could be a useful tactic. Or maybe even have a Y-wing do that and use their proton torpedoes to get use their proton torpedoes on the TIE fighters and get much better shots on them.
That
very powerful shots.
Badly.
It does seem like every time that happened, you end up running out of torpedoes because you need that Y-wing. You need that one Y-wing to take a shot.
You only need 2 torpedoes. It's fine. Come on.
But I've only seen one ship ever get. Every time I've played, I've never seen more than one ship fire their torpedoes at the exhaust port.
Yeah, that's what we've seen. Yeah, it's always that one guy taking a shot, which is kind of funny. I want to say we had one game where we had 2 people take a shot, and it to me that one felt the most like it is the movie. It's the first guy went and just hit nothing, knocked the shield off of it.
Hit the armor plating.
Yeah, knocked the shield off of it, and then the second guy's like, I got this, and he took the shot and just missed, missed everything, somehow fired it off into space, and
because
credits roll.
Turn off his targeting computer.
Right? Yeah, credits roll, and you're like, oh, what was all that for? They lost, and the moon got blown up and everything. That was horrible.
Yep. All right.
So did you have anything else?
Oh, right. So I actually haven't really gotten even into my whole spiel about setting up the scenario. So basically, my observation here is that just like in the movie, the strategy for the scenario, or for really like any trench run type scenario, because Dagobah Dave's isn't the only one out there, is to send a few ships, or as many ships as you can, at a hard and fast attack run at the exhaust point, or at the exhaust port, or whatever your target is. If you're looking at other similarly set up scenarios, so this actually creates sort of a problem in many scenarios that crops up very often, because there's a lot of scenarios out there, but they tend to have similar themes in that there's very often something that one side is protecting. So this could be a shuttle, it could be a container, it could be, anything. But there's something on the table that one side wants to blow up and the other side wants to protect. So if you look back at Mission 1 Political Escort, which we did in a previous Ready Room, that would be the Senator's Shuttle. So one side is escorting, one side is attacking. And in general, the best move for the attackers is to just get as close as possible and attack the target directly. And the defenders have to kill the attackers before they can put enough damage on the target and win the game. And this kind of creates like a lack of decision making between the players if there's no mitigating factors in the scenario. Because if all one side needs to do is destroy something on the table to win, then that's what they're going to do, and they're going to do it pretty mindlessly, right? You're going to send everything at the target, try to blow it up as quickly as possible before the enemy team kills you. And the enemy team is obviously going to try to kill you as fast as possible before you can do that. There's no strategic or tactical nuance to that unless there's additional layers in the game. And this is a common thing that I've been calling suicide run syndrome.
So basically the idea is just throw everything you can, don't even bother to do anything other than race towards the objective and blast it to pieces.
Right, because that is often the smartest thing to do to win the scenario.
Objective makes it mindless in that sense.
Right, like and you throw away your pilot's lives, you don't care if people die to accomplish your objective. As long as that shuttle gets blown up in the end, you win. And it doesn't matter if all of the enemy fighters are still on the table and you have one guy left, you win if you kill a shuttle or you kill the target or whatever. So it creates this like situation where only one side is like interested in any sort of dogfighting, which is normally the whole point of an X-Wing game. Normally in a standard match, you're maneuvering against the other player, you're trying to anticipate where he's going to go. Your ships have complicated positional and tactical situations with each other, and there's a lot of guesswork and sort of like a psychological element to the game where you're trying to anticipate the enemy's move. You're trying to not make the obvious move yourself, and you're trying to give yourself the best positional advantage to take out the enemy before he takes out you. But in a scenario where you're trying to kill something, it's usually not that complicated. You gotta fly straight at it as fast as possible and hit it as hard as you can, and ignore the enemy ships because they're just a waste of your time. You're not gonna put enough damage on them to make any difference between now and the end of the scenario. It's best to just concentrate on the target.
I think there can be some nuances that you can add on. I think I should say that in the list building, there's possibilities to kind of prevent that with various things. Like doing the shuttle, the Senator's Shuttle, I could see, ideas that you could crop up. But I do agree that there aren't that many.
Well, the thing about the Senator's Shuttle mission, Mission 1 Political Escort, is that it does have a mechanism in the scenario to prevent a really bad suicide run syndrome situation from coming up. And that's the protect action. So that's an action that you get only in that scenario where escorting ships can put an evade token on the shuttle, which is the target. So that makes it less of a clear choice what your first target should be, especially if the defender has taken a lot of ships and they can put a lot of evade tokens on that shuttle. Then you're forced to engage the defenders at that point. So there is a decent amount of nuance in that mission because of that protect action. But a lot of the missions that go up on mission control will not have that kind of thing, for example.
Right, because I think there's different things that could balance out such a mission. Like, one is if you're running some sort of campaign or some sort of extended version of X-Wing where actually suffering losses was bad, to the point that you don't really want to just get, as long as one guy gets through and blows it up, but everybody else is dead, that's horrible. That's a Pyrrhic victory,
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect example. There's a few different ways you can mitigate the effect of suicide run syndrome or eliminate it entirely. So going down the list, we have you can score the attacker on how many ships they lose. So if you kill the target, say it's 10 points, but you lose 2 points for every ship that dies. So you can't just send your ships on a suicide run in this situation. You have to try and have better survival, at least on the way in. So that can sort of help dissuade you from sending your guys on a suicide mission. Another way you can prevent suicide run syndrome is by layering on defense mechanisms to the target. So say instead of having to blow up one shuttle, say you're going after like a command bunker, but there's supporting structures nearby the command bunker, like maybe a shield generator or a turbo laser turret. You can have all sorts of things that it might make more sense for you to target first, or maybe you even have to target first.
Right.
So it gives you more of like, it gives you decisions.
One ship. Yeah, you got to blow like multiple up, not just one. Right. Yeah. At the core of this is adding decisions, right? You don't necessarily have to make the scenario one where you end up having a dogfight per se, although that's usually a good thing to aim for, at least to have some sort of dogfight element. But as long as both players are having to make decisions about what they do and what's best during the game, then suicide runner syndrome isn't too bad. Right. So basically, suicide syndrome, you don't want to do it so that you just run towards the objective and boom, it's over. You want to have enough nuance. You want to have enough to make it an actual game of it, make it enough of a fight, not as boring. So, you want to come up with these different tools to kind of prevent the suicide run for when you're designing missions. Right. Yeah. This is absolutely a mission design problem more than a mission strategy problem. If you want to do anything about mitigating SRS, you have to do it in the design phase. Another thing you can do, and I've done this in a few of my scenarios, is having a fortified target that can only be affected by torpedoes or missiles. So, sort of like how Dagobah Dave has the exhaust port that can only be attacked by proton torpedoes. You might have, again, like a fortified command bunker that can only be destroyed by torpedoes or missiles, and then restrict how many ships can carry those torpedoes or missiles, or give only a certain number of the rebel or of the attacker's ships torpedoes and missiles for free, and sort of create a sort of like a escort and strike craft
dynamic within the attacker's fleet. So you would have some escort ships escorting, 2 or 3 bombers on the way in, sort of like, have your X-wings escorting your Y-wings. The X-wings have to try and destroy as many of the defending ships as possible to protect the Y-wings on their way in, that sort of thing. You could also even delay the arrival of a target. So, say we go back to the mission 1 political escort with the Senator's shuttle. If the Senator's shuttle didn't show up until turn 3, then the attackers would be forced to dogfight with the defenders, or at least try and evade them until the shuttle showed up, and you'd have to contend with the defenders instead of ignore them.
Yeah, I could see that.
And of course, the best way to really deal with SRS is to play in a campaign setting where you actually care if your pilots die or not.
Right.
Then you will not be sending them on suicide attacks unless it's actually important, and then it will actually feel fun because you're sacrificing important pilots to get your objective complete instead of just nameless guys that are going to come back next time you play the game anyway. You don't care about. Right.
Yeah, like, oh, Suntirfell's dead again. I'll just reboot the next match. Right.
Exactly. But imagine if you lost Suntirfell and you could never play him again. You would probably you would be more careful with Suntirfell.
He took 1 damage. Oh my god.
He's out of here.
Yeah, so, I see that.
Yeah, so if you're ever trying to design a scenario with a mechanic where one side has to destroy something on the other side, then give some thought to this. And when you're trying to balance your scenario, play it a few times where the attackers just focus completely on destroying their target and ignore the defenders. Because it's, very often the smartest thing for the attackers to do.
Right. So basically, when you're trying to set up missions, try to make the mission smart so it's not just a little one-shot.
Right. Yeah. Try and add a layer in there that makes it not the best decision to just go, straight in and attack your target. Yeah. And ignore the defenders.
Yeah.
It's best if both sides have to engage each other and dogfight to at least some extent to complete their objectives.
And that
definitely makes sense.
And that's always good to keep in mind, because throwing together weird stuff all the time, because sometimes, you find yourself just, there's 3 of us, at the game night, and there's that odd man. Let's just throw together a mission. Let's just do this random crap. And, to think about that, I think on the forums this week, there was a guy who, his brother had a bachelor party that they were trying to get, only half of them ever played the game before, but they had like 16 people. They're trying to throw up some epic game, and what the hell do they do, or heck do they do to, kind of just, so it's always good to keep these things, but you just kind of want to throw something odd together at odd random times.
And if you're playing very casually, this is maybe not as important. Like, because people tend to default to a dogfight if you don't make the objectives super obvious and very important for winning the game.
Yep. I will say, I do have a light here on my control panel that is telling me we are getting close to time. We're about ready to reach our destination.
About ready to make our landing?
Yep. So, did you have any last-minute bits you want to throw in on the end of that?
I think I've said my piece. Think about suicide run syndrome when you're making your scenarios, and keep in mind the different things that you can do to mitigate it.
Excellent. I think tonight was a good episode. I think we kind of rambled on for a while and got to talk about a lot. We just, with one mission and kind of just that as our main focus, we've kind of dug into it quite a bit. So
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it's good. A little story time, little kind of scenario building time was good. Got a little bit of everything.
Little rant session with the.
Just a small rant.
Worried about when we see a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So please, once again, contact us at theshuttletydirium@gmail.com or the Shuttle, last name Tydirium, on Facebook. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening to tonight's episode. I hope everybody has a great time and tune in till next week.